Alright, so I thought I'd go over a few of the secrets to my settings. If you noticed, even in the presets, only the 0.2 is actually at a solid number. Everything else is divided up where you have a 0.12, 0.16. A lot of times you'll see a 0.18, but not on these presettings. So that's actually important, why there's not a 0.01. And that has a lot to do with the speed and the heat that gets distributed when you're making that thin of layer based on the nozzle size. So a 0.4 nozzle runs best at high quality at 0.12. Now a 0.2 nozzle runs best quality around a 0.08 to a 0.06. And again, a lot of times that can also determine on what your speeds are going to be at to compensate for that melting and size. If any of that makes sense. We'll break it down a little easier, but just to get started, if you noticed, we don't really use a 0.1. So if we want to go to the high quality, the presets, high quality, obviously, your real important settings are not actually here. They're down here. So as you see, normal printing acceleration for high quality 0.12 preset is a 4000. Now go to the 0.12 just fine detail. Now you're at a 10,000 normal printing acceleration speed. What we do here is always depending on the model, but just a quick reference, we usually stick to the high qualities. We then go through our settings here. We found 100. We are never in a rush for our prints because they are always of high detail, high style. This 120 can change based on how much of a flat surface it has to run across. We always change these as a quick 10, 20, 30s, and 40s for overhangs. We drop our gap fill to 150. Support systems, we run at 100. Now, important settings. Our travel at 500's just fine. We're running the P1S, so there's not a bunch of bed flinging around. If this was the A1, I actually dropped this down to 300. Now, utilizing the presets, what we do is we'll drop this by 1000. We'll drop initial layer to 300 to make sure you get a good first layer. You do the outer wall at 1500. You do the top surface at 1500. Now, this will tack on about an extra 10% of hours, if that makes sense. So like instead of a 16-hour print, you're probably going to do about a 20-hour print. Now these settings, in my opinion, have held the best for all those big models that I do on a regular basis. Now your acceleration speeds, those are what really will determine how well the model prints. Now, let me show you guys a little bit of why and how I can show you that real quick. Hopefully this thing will. I am going to scale this up, by the way. We're going to do a full plate. We are going to use a gradient rainbow for this Godzilla. Just thought that would be cool. One of the actual things I forgot to mention, that anytime I have little spikes or little speeds at the top, I always want to add, before I lose it, right here, small parameter thresholds. I'll bring that to a 10 or a 15 so that it drops my settings by 50% when it's doing those little radiuses. Oh, I forgot to say export's off actually. So anyway, to get real quick to how you want to actually look at the model once it's sliced. This is going to determine a lot on how it's going to look once you're done. And what you want to go to is actually your flow. So watch the colors change. So now, check that out. What's going to happen if you have a silk is you're actually going to see the change between the flow rates. So a lot of times you want those to fall together and look like they blend in with one another for the most part. This might be because of that 10 I actually added. Let's take a look. We're going to look at it with a little different flow rate. So, there we go. Now see how that 10, now that slowed everything down for once it hit those real smaller sections. So depending on the filament, it being silk, you will see silk. Silk, you will see all that difference in speed change. Normal filament or matted filament, you have a lot more to play with. You're not going to be as noticeable between differences in flow rates. But that one little setting right there, adding that to a 10, which we'll do it actually at 15, because my goal is to blend everything together to look better before it even starts to print. So these are those decisions that we have to make. You know, the type of filament. So look at that. That's really going to be noticeable. So there's various ways. What you could do is also keep bringing things down to more of what you think is going to work best to blend those colors. Right now, I can already see what's happening is that if I bring this, instead of going 50%, let's do 80%. And if I'm doing that the right direction, there's a chance I could be doing that in the wrong direction. It can either make it a lot worse or a lot better. And it's the lot better. So the whole goal with your flow is you want this to blend together the best you can, especially with a silk filament, in order to keep a completely uniformed blend of color from the bottom to the top. So yeah, quick tip on why you should be paying attention to your flow rate. And your flow rate is going to be determined by your speed rate, because these are three things. You have movement, you have melting, and you have cooling. All of those have to blend together perfectly in order to give you the perfect, most optimal print. So little tips and tricks there to start getting more into how technical this does end up getting after a while, when you start to really break apart what decisions are made to make sure that you have a solid, high definition FDM print that is completely uniformic in color from bottom to top, and you don't have these different speed changes and blends that do not fit correctly. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to scale this bad boy up. We'll show a preview of our settings, and then we'll show the print once it's done to show you guys a little more about it. So this is now where more decision making comes in as a 3D printing artist. Now, I went over the speeds. It's time to now go over, you know, how we want it to look, along with its strength, infill, and all that fun stuff. So we're using a gradient material. We want to get as many colors as we can onto the model. And doing that would probably be around the 200 to 250 gram mark to get the full rolls, well, not full roll, but to get the actual full experience of that gradient material. It's probably about a quarter of a roll or so. So with these basic settings, what we're going to do is probably turn up a wall loop and add 5%. So yeah, we're only at 150 right now. So we're going to want to turn up a wall loop, make it stronger that way. And we're going to add 20% to our infill. Now, I know people are always trying to save, make things go faster, all that great stuff. I get it, I do. What I'm doing here is different. I'm trying to make this to its best possibility that I can. I'm not worried about how much infill it's going to take. I'm not worried about how much time it's going to take or the cost it's going to take. And yes, that does become a problem, because it's hard for me to sell a lot of these items, because it's hard for me to explain to a customer because of the time and how much material is going into it. It ends up being like $100 to $150 model or print. But I don't want to do that to them. I would prefer them to go buy an ender and do it for themselves. Like, that's my primary goal. But I do this to keep myself clean, and I do this to get it to its best possible aspect I can. So for me, it's not about saving money nor time. It's about producing an item that is overwhelmingly the best it could possibly be from what I'm working with. So with adding all that fun stuff, we are now at 192. It's going to take 22 hours. You know, I think we're about good right there. 200 grams should give me a nice cycle of color, rather than doing like the 150 and only getting stuck with 2 colors. I think every 50 grams is a color, I hope. I'm kind of guessing at. So we will try this bad boy out. I almost forgot about temperature. So working as a silk filament 205 in the P1S, sorry, is usually what I stick to. That max volumetric speed, to me, 12 has worked perfect for PLA, and like TPU, it's usually in like the 3.6 range. PET-G, it's in like the 8 range, I believe. Sometimes you'll see it in the 21 range. 21 works for AMS. If you're just doing a 1 direct drive yourself, I stick to 12. Like I said, you'll go down and you'll see it on 21 and stuff. I think that's for the AMS, in my opinion. Somebody else can correct that. But I have found great results from all of these 3 things I have pointed out. Alright, who's ready for the conclusion of the Godzilla settings? Definitely came out really well. It took 22 hours. On basic settings, this thing would probably take only about 16, but for how I run it and quality-wise, and to get that amazing color and as much as you can get put into it, here he is. Definitely have good layer adhesion, good texture along the side of the model itself to help the interlocking pieces are working. Some gap in the teeth. And again, nothing's ever absolutely perfect with an FDM printer especially, but it's how close can you really get it, and with what settings and what little tricks you